Well, I'm in slightly unfamiliar surrounds today. I'm in a hotel room in the Hilton in Winnipeg. We're just at the end of our blood vein trip and we're just about to check out. But we're heading downtown Winnipeg today to go to the Manitoba Museum, which is a really interesting museum. Lots of history of the area, lots to link in with the trip that we've done in terms of the native peoples of the area, the natural history of the area, and the history of the fur trade and the Hudson's Bay Company. So that's going to be a really interesting visit today, and I'll try and capture some of that with my camera as we go, and I'll share that with you in this video. So enjoy. This stone structure is an example of an Inukshuk, an Inuit word meaning something acting in the capacity of a man or something resembling a person. Varying in size, complexity and location, these structures were part of caribou hunting strategy. They served as land and water navigational aids as well as campsite markers, and they were in some cases reminders of special occasions. None of Manitoba actually lies in the Arctic Circle, but the north of the province, particularly the land closest to Hudson Bay, experiences extreme cold in the winter. The combination of a low winter sun and Arctic airflows creates a really cold environment. Churchill, Manitoba, in the north of the province, is famous for its polar bears. Polar bears, however, are not the only animal species to have become really well adapted to the snow in Manitoba's winters. Native people have adapted to the various cold environments here too, with ingenious material cultures. I like this. This is a sled brake made of caribou antler. And here we've got a snow knife made of bone.
Various bands and tribes of native peoples made use of local resources. As has been widely popularised, the coastal Inuit made use of large sea mammals such as narwhal and seals, but there were some more inland Inuit who hunted caribou, and further south and further into the boreal forest were also the Dene in this area. This is nice. Here are some examples and models of Inuit hunting technology, from a model kayak to a bow and arrow to a harpoon to even a slingshot. There's harpoon tips there, and interestingly in the middle this is a little gill needle for collecting fish together, and above that is this bladder which was used to stop sea mammal prey from sinking. We've got a nice hand line there made from a caribou antler as well, so that was used for ice fishing. A sinew cord. Some of the bands of Inuit and Dene or Chipewyan relied heavily on the caribou, which are very similar to European or Eurasian reindeer. As well as a source of meat and antlers, another major use was to make clothing from the skins, and here's examples of a child's parka and a woman's parka. These required a lot of work, both in terms of preparing the skins and then cutting and sewing the clothing into the finished garments. As you can see here, they're really finely crafted and they're really almost works of art. Anyone who's prepared a skin knows there's a lot of scraping involved, and here's a couple of scrapers that we use for preparing caribou skins. On the right is a shoulder blade or scapular scraper that was used initially for defleshing the hide, and then on the left is a stone scraper which was used for softening the fibres and stretching the fibres after that. Then there were a couple of other scrapers. The implements on the left here are metal scrapers, and these were used to scrape the skin thin, and before access to metal these were made of sharpened bone. The tool on the right, the semicircular blade, is the tool that's often referred to as a woman's knife or the ulu. This is a general purpose tool for cutting meat, preparing hides, cutting tobacco, cutting moss for lamp wicks, that type of general purpose. Here's some sinew which was pounded and used for thread, and this is a traditional sewing pouch made of the feet of eider ducks. Now here's a few things I thought you might like. There's a striker light made of a piece of file embedded into a piece of antler, and that was used on a piece of iron porites to create sparks. Also, this is quite ingenious, I like this. It's a water collection ladle effectively made of caribou hide. I like that, I like the ingenuity there. And then also traditionally snares were made of rawhide, sometimes referred to as babiche. This type of snare twisted up. Also here we've got a netting needle, a bit of a rough example, but some nice netting there as well, made of traditional materials, often used bark fibres from trees for making nets traditionally in this part of the world. American basswood was one that was used a lot for making good fishing nets. The northern coniferous or boreal forest biome is one of the largest biomes on Earth. It's dominated by evergreen conifers, and it occurs as a broad band across the northern half of Eurasia as well as right across North America. The Siberian section is the largest forest on Earth, and the North American segment stretches 6,300 kilometers east to west and 500 to 800 kilometers north to south. Long and bitterly cold winters and short and often hot summers are typically characteristic of this type of forest, and you can see from this satellite imagery of Manitoba a large swathe of boreal forest cuts across the middle of Manitoba, and this is the environment we've been travelling through. You can see it's a mosaic of lakes and forest, and the canoe makes sense here. In the winter, much of this is frozen, and the land becomes a realm of the snowshoe and the sled or toboggan, and it was a hard winter for the native peoples here, and I particularly liked this spring Thanksgiving which I saw in the museum, and I'll replicate it here for you. museum is a neat little model camp reconstruction of an early summer camp in the southern Boreal forest around the time of European contact with these Algonquin speaking people. These people were primarily hunters and they subsisted on moose, woodland caribou, elk, bison, bear and smaller mammals. Fish, birds and plant resources such as maple sap, berries and wild rice were also dietary staples. Mobility was important. It was a necessary adaptation to seasonal movements and local fluctuations of game. Material belongings were few and far between. They were highly portable. Methods of transportation, which included a birch bark canoe and tump line in the summer and snowshoes in toboggan in winter. Flexibility in group membership enabled people to disperse in times of scarcity and to reassemble when food resources were plentiful. Usually remaining together until late fall, these regional encampments allowed many forms of activity to occur. A bit further along in the museum are some life-size depictions of forest scenes. I found them a little bit twee, to be honest with you. I thought they were a little bit naff, but one thing that did come out of this, or two things actually that were interesting. One, again, is the emphasis on the dependence on small game, or the reliance on small game and the importance of small game. And second was the depiction of painting of rock art, and that rang a chord with me because we'd seen some absolutely fantastic pictographs on the Blood Vein River while paddling it the previous few weeks. Interestingly as well, later on there was information on how they made the paint and specifically the fish resources that they used, sturgeon in particular. Here's a depiction of the sturgeon, a very prehistoric looking fish, and it wasn't just the oil that was used. Part of the body was actually used to make a container to contain the oil as well, which is very resourceful, and here's an example of that in the display. What I liked about the next section was a focus on really useful resources that the native people valued highly, but they're still really important bushcraft resources to this day. First was the birch and its various uses, as well as uses of other things like Fomes fomentarius, which grows on birch typically, particularly in this part of the world. Uses of the bark, artwork, bite art, using the artwork. There's a calling horn there for calling moose, and this is a lovely decorated basket, birch bark basket at the bottom here as well. Next up was the moose. The moose was a significant factor in the survival of the Cree and Ojibwa First Nations, and this is shown by its frequency in art forms such as pictographs and decorative motifs. You can also see the many other items apart from the hide and the flesh that the moose was used for here, from drums to pipes to hammers to games to scraping tools to actually deflesh the hides in the first place. Many uses for all parts of the animal. And we can't come to the end of a discussion of this part of the world without mentioning the loon. This is the loon. It's the great northern diver. Its call is synonymous with the North Woods, particularly lakes of the North Woods, and anybody who's paddled there, as we had done in recent weeks, will recognize it, and it's just one of the icons of the North Woods and the water that goes with the North Woods. This was my second visit to the Manitoba Museum, and if you're ever in Winnipeg, I'd thoroughly recommend a visit. I enjoyed it as much, if not more, than the first time I visited. There's a lot there of interest to people who are interested in bushcraft and traditional skills. Those of you that are interested in nature and native peoples and anthropology, there's lots and lots of interest there. And for us, it really capped off well the 2-week trip that we'd done, where we'd been travelling through part of the environment from Ontario into Manitoba, and we'd seen many of the species, the birch, the pine, the spruces. We'd seen moose, we'd seen many of the small game, we'd seen wild birds, we'd seen loons, and we'd heard loons, and it was just great to put all of that in context with the natural history and the geology and the history of the native peoples that used to live from the land in that area. So it was a really nice bringing it together. There's lots more in the museum about different parts of Manitoba as well, and I would thoroughly recommend you spend a good amount of time in there. If you do, you need more than a couple of hours to see everything in there. So thanks for joining me on this virtual visit to the Manitoba Museum. Hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've learned something from it, or it's consolidated knowledge you already had, or made some connections between things that you knew, or it's filled in some gaps or joined some dots. I always learn stuff from visiting museums such as this, and I hope it also gives you an idea of why I love visiting and travelling in the Boreal forest as well. And the Boreal forest in Manitoba is very special, and look out for a full-length video of our journey that I'll be producing at some stage in the near future.